Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Veterans Assistance. There we go. Veterans Assistance Benefits, What to Know and How to Apply, presented by Home Instead and hosted by the American Society on Aging. Before we begin, let's go over a few important notes. You may have noticed a recent change on our web pages regarding CE availability. To stay aligned with evolving guidance from regulatory boards, we refine how CE information is presented. Please note that not all webinars offer all types of continuing education credit. Each webinar page will list the specific CE types available for that session. So we encourage you to review the CE details carefully, and if your specific accreditation board isn't listed, we recommend checking directly with them to confirm whether one of the available CE types will be accepted. You can apply for your certificate right after today's webinar by clicking on the tab above the presentation screen. Select your certificate type or board, and if you don't have a license number, just enter NA. For more information, click the How to Claim Credit tab. Throughout the webinar, you'll see periodic engagement checkpoints. Please disable your pop-up blocker and respond when prompted. Instructions for disabling pop-ups can be found under the Reminders tab. Make sure that you're logged in with the email you used to register and remain logged in and complete checkpoints to receive your certificate. If you experience any technical issues during today's presentation, please try refreshing your browser. This usually resolves any audio or visual issues. However, if the problem continues, you can click on the Help tab for assistance. You'll find today's presentation slides in the Materials tab, and a recording will also be available in your classroom within 48 hours. And finally, we welcome your questions. Just use the Q&A tab and we'll address as many as we can at the end of today's programming. Now let's meet today's presenters. Dr. Lakeland Eichenberger is a gerontologist and caregiving advocate with Home Instead, the world's largest home care provider. With a PhD in gerontology, Lakeland has worked both directly with older adults and on a national scale to educate families, professionals, and communities about aging and caregiving. And she's joined by Jacob Tatel, Director of Research and Strategy at Paradigm Senior Services. Jacob is a national expert on Medicaid and VA programs for home care, helping agencies navigate the complexities of policy, compliance, and reimbursement. His work ensures providers stay aligned with evolving regulations and deliver quality care to veterans. Thank you both so much for being here. Lakeland, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Wednesday afternoon or lunch hour with us. I'm really excited to have Jacob joining me. You'll hear from him in just a bit. But we're talking about a really important topic and one that some don't know might be available to them, VA benefits. We know that older adults, older veterans might be eligible for benefits through the Department of Veteran Affairs. So these VA benefits are not just helpful in easing the burden on the family caregiver, but they are well-earned benefits by the men and women who have dedicated themselves to defending our country. But again, sometimes the VA system might be a little intimidating, hard to navigate. People might think accessing these resources is too overwhelming. So hopefully by the end of today's webinar, we'll have shared a wealth of information to make that process a little less intimidating, a little more accessible to families. So we hope that you as professionals pass along this knowledge and information to those that you work with and those that you serve. Because again, veterans deserve these services that they have worked so hard for. So let's start by just reviewing quickly the objectives here on this next slide. We're going to talk about the VA caregiver programs, benefits, and qualifications. There's 4 programs that we'll cover in detail. We'll talk about how to get started, who to contact, and then we'll talk through some tips for a successful application process for VA benefits. So we do have a lot to cover, and so we will hop right in. But I think sometimes it's helpful to just kind of understand the kind of military and veteran caregiving population, older adults that might qualify for these benefits. So we're going to go through some of the numbers. What you're seeing on the screen comes from a RAND study on America's military and veteran caregivers, the hidden heroes emerging from the shadows. And so this study found that there are 14.3 million military and veteran caregivers in the U.S. today, which actually represents 5.5% of the U.S. adult population. And among that group, about 26% are caring for someone 60 years and younger, while 74% are caring for a veteran over the age of 60. And so I think it's kind of interesting to compare these two groups because we do see some similarities, but also some differences. For those over the age of 60, they're likely being cared for by a family member, like an adult child, or caring for a parent, or a spouse caring for their partner. Meanwhile, those under 60 are more likely to be cared for by more of the non-traditional caregiver, maybe a neighbor, friend, or a relative like a sibling, aunt, or uncle. Both groups are likely caring for a vet with a chronic condition and someone that needs assistance with at least one of their activities of daily living. And you can see that both groups had a significant percentage in those that are diagnosed with a mental health condition or substance abuse disorder. And so if you compare the over 60 group of veterans in this study to civilians, 40% of vets over the age of 60 have that diagnosis of a mental health condition, compared with 24% of civilians. So I think that that's just important to recognize, because for some, that might add to the caregiving dynamic, the caregiving situation. There might be more stress, strain, burden related to some of the caregiving of these veterans. I think it's also interesting to look at the number of hours that these military and veteran caregivers are spending supporting their loved ones each week. So on this chart, you'll see the time spent caregiving. The blue is those that are caring for a vet under the age of 60. The green is those caring over the age of 60. A few things stood out to me. Most people are falling in that 1 to 8 hours of weekly care. And the majority of caregivers, regardless of the age, are falling into that category. And then we see some of the younger care recipients requiring a little more intensive care. Someone under the age of 60 is more likely to be receiving 21 to 30 hours of care, and that's almost double that of the over 60 age category. So this might indicate that maybe the younger veterans might need more care, it might be more intensive or complex. But regardless of the age, I think it's really important that we're looking at the services available to these veterans and helping them apply for them and have a successful application process to ease some of the caregiving burden. Because we know, especially for an older veteran, as they age, they might need more care. And so if we can get them introduced to these VA benefits, we can support them and their caregiver along their caregiving journey. And what we do need to recognize is that there's a need for awareness when it comes to VA benefits. We know that there is 8.4 million veterans over the age of 65, and 4.4 million have a service-connected disability. And then if you look at the number of those that are utilizing services, if you look just at the home health aid benefit in particular, about over 170,000 veterans are using that benefit. So if you do all the math, that means only about 2% of people who could be eligible for that benefit are receiving the benefit. And I think, again, just points to the need for awareness. And there could be some barriers, which we're going to talk about later, that could be preventing veterans and their caregivers from seeking out support. Again, we'll talk more about that in just a bit. But when I interact with an older adult, a family caregiver, they often have some common questions that come up. And so when we're talking with individuals that might need care and support, they're often asking, how are we going to pay for this care? And a lot of times there's confusion on what's covered, what's not covered. A lot of people assume that maybe Social Security or Medicare will pay for services in the home or help and support. Um, and in many cases, that's not the case. There's a lot of misconceptions there, but they might not even realize that they could qualify for benefits from the VA that could support them. And that could be another way to help pay for the services. And then others ask, are there benefits for family caregivers? And towards the end, I'm going to share a slide that highlights that the VA does have support resources specific to family caregivers. So it's important to share that information out so people can tap into those resources for support. And then another question I get is, where do we even start with these VA programs? While they exist, sometimes people don't know about them. They might think, gosh, it's probably going to be a lot of time, effort, paperwork. It might be overwhelming to the caregiver who already has so much on their plate. And so when caregivers have these types of questions, they're often turning to us as professionals to help guide them, provide them resources and support through the process. And so, again, I'm very glad that you're all joining us today. And my hope is that you can pass these learnings along to the families that you work with. And we're going to go over the 4 main programs of the VA that caregivers and older veterans or veterans of all ages could benefit from. But before I turn it over to Jacob, I wanted to share one story of how these benefits have really made a difference for a veteran and their family. As I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking back through my work over the years. I also connected with a few of our Home Instead franchise offices that are very passionate about providing care to veterans. And this is one story that came about through those conversations. So I just wanted to share Mr. P, his final mission as a veteran final mission. So Mr. P was a very proud veteran in his 80s, and he spent a lifetime serving his country and loving his wife of 59 years. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and the man who had always been strong and self-reliant suddenly faced a battle he couldn't fight alone. As his illness progressed, even simple tasks like bathing became difficult. Yet he couldn't bear the thought of burdening his beloved wife with such an intimate type of care. Out of love and pride, he declined her help, but that came at a cost. His hygiene began to suffer, and his safety really was at risk. We started to notice a quiet sadness take root in Mr. P. The couple, who was once very vibrant and social, started to become more and more isolated as his wife was providing around-the-clock care. We could tell that she was growing weary. Signs of caregiver stress and burden were becoming very evident, and really they both were slipping away, and not just from each other, but also from others. And then the family discovered something that changed everything. Mr. P could utilize his VA benefits to receive care at home. And that's really when Home Instead stepped in. So a trained professional caregiver began visiting each morning to help Mr. P with his bathing, got him shaved, and he really started to blossom. He was feeling like himself again. And it wasn't just about getting clean, it was about really restoring his dignity. And every morning he was able to proudly sit down next to his wife and enjoy breakfast with the woman he loved. And as trust began to build between the caregiver and the family, something really beautiful began to happen. His wife, who had carried the caregiving burden for so long, was finally able to step away, get some respite, reconnect with some of her friends, and just have time for herself again. At that point, the caregiving was shared. Her burden was lightened, and everyone just seemed to take a sigh of relief. But as Mr. P's condition worsened, the family faced a heartbreaking choice. Do they move him in to an inpatient VA hospice facility in a neighboring town where it would be really hard for the wife to visit, or could they find another way? And they weren't alone on this journey. Home Instead, the hospice agency locally, and the VA came together to make sure it was possible for Mr. P to stay at home, surrounded by those that he loved. So in his final days, he shared memories, laughter, and quiet moments with his family, and without being asked. The caregiver, who had become part of the family, the professional caregiver, he began writing down Mr. P's stories, capturing his legacy so his family could hold on to them forever. So it's a really beautiful example of how care is possible with some collaboration and support, the right programs coming together to really honor the veteran. And for Mr. P, his final mission wasn't about survival. It really was about dignity, love, and in the comfort of his own home. And so we want that for so many more veterans. And so I just share that as a way to get us all thinking about how we can collaborate, how we can connect veterans with their resources through these various programs. So Jacob, I'll now pass it over to you to go into detail on these 4 programs.
Thank you for that. And wow, what a heartwarming story. I mean, it's just truly phenomenal to hear of just how valuable these programs are to people in the community and how impactful they are to real lives that are being lived. And, you know, I think on the end of focusing on how these programs function, sometimes we get out of the actual impact. So I really appreciate you sharing that story, Lakeland. So as mentioned before, my name is Jacob. I am with Paradigm Senior Services, and what we do day in and day out is work with home care companies to help them help the veterans in their community. Because as we all know, if you have tried to navigate the VA system, it can be quite challenging. I trying to give my 14-year-old cat medication. It's very difficult. But hopefully from this, we can give you a nice breakdown as to what is actually approved, what can be approved through the VA system, what these main benefits are, what they actually offer instead of just what they're called, and then lastly, you know, how to get enrolled. But I do want to start with something that Lakeland said earlier, which was the need for awareness. What we found at Paradigm is that agencies who really understand how these programs work and how they function are able to go out into the community and help veterans on a very, very detailed level, go all the way from getting enrolled in their VA benefits to receiving care to making sure that they are in the home. And what we're seeing is on a national level, there's a lot of support for this and making sure that veterans are staying in their home as they're aging. Something that we saw just last year was the Elizabeth Dole Act, which is a further commitment to making sure veterans are able to stay in their home, uh, and age in place. And so what we're seeing is some kind of new focus on some of these programs and some additional funding get transferred into these programs. But without further ado, let's talk about them. So the 4 main programs that exist for VA home care would be the Homemaker and Home Health Aid program, this Home Health Aid and Homemaker and Respite program, the Aid and Attendance Pension, Veteran-Directed Care, and lastly, the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers. So let's go ahead and jump to it, starting with the Home Health Aid and Homemaker and Respite program. So what this program is, it's what most people think of when they think of working with the VA. So how I like to describe it is there's a number of different entities at play when working with this program, and it all comes from the beginning of the Community Care Network, which started in 2019-2020. So the Community Care Network is how the VA decided they were going to operate with agencies and providers out in the community separate from the VA's system, their internal system. So what happens is a provider, a home care provider, such as a home instead franchise, they contract with the VA through one of the third-party administrators, which would be Optum or TriWest, depending on which VA region you're located in. From there, that agency then actually works with the VA medical center that's nearby. So some agencies that we work with 2 or 3 VAMCs, some work with just one. It really just depends. But what's really important is that the actual groundwork that's happening for this program is happening at the VA Medical Center level. And then it's only the reimbursement and the payment for that that goes through the third-party administrators. So if you're someone who's actively working with veterans, what you need to understand is this, and that is that the Homemaker and Home Health Aid program can approve anywhere between 6 hours a week of care to veterans all the way up to 24/7 care. That does technically exist, although I don't usually see that happening. I see a very typical amount of care to be approved for a veteran through this program is somewhere within that 12 to 16 hour a week range, which is pretty consistent with what we saw the needs were on slide 5 that Lakeland was showing, where most veterans, their family members are providing anywhere between 1 to 8 hours of care a week. So we're seeing that the amount of care that's approved through this program is roughly consistent with that, which is wonderful. So something that a lot of home care providers do see, though, is that as that veteran ages, there's often a question of how to get more hours, and how to provide that veteran with more help. And the answer is because it is being approved through the VAMC, and we'll talk a little bit about how that referral flows through the VA Medical Center. We'll talk about that in just a couple slides here. But because it's happening on that local level, agencies are able to actually advocate for that veteran, and family members are able to advocate for that veteran with the case manager directly to get more help to make sure that they are getting the care that they need. So how is someone eligible for this program? Well, this program is almost entirely a needs-based program. So of course, someone must have general VA health eligibility. So they must have served in active military, naval, or air service, and separated under any conditions other than dishonorable. And they need to have enrolled in their VA medical help. So sometimes sometimes veterans don't quite know where to go, what to do for that. We will get into that later. Medical, they must be enrolled in their VA health, but they must have a demonstrable need for daily personal care assistance. So they need to be able to see that they need help with activities of daily living. So does that veteran need assistance with their toileting? Do they need assistance with showering? Do they need assistance doing daily tasks? Those sorts of things, they need to be able to demonstrate that. There aren't any specific financial income restrictions on this program outside of those that are just for general VA health benefits. So moving on into how a referral goes from initial assessment to a care schedule is created. So typically how this works is that a veteran would get in front of their primary care physician through the VA. That physician would run an assessment on the veteran and say, it looks like there is care need identified. You have this number of ADLs that need assistance. You fall into this standard episode of care, which is referred to as a SEOC. You fall into this care bucket. Let's say you need somewhere between 16 hours a week and 20 hours a week of care. That assessment is then handed over to the VA caseworker. The VA caseworker will then look through that assessment, see what the veteran needs, take into account everything that they're already receiving across the board, and determine the type and the quantity of authorized care. So that care then creates an authorization with the caseworker's notes attached to it. The veteran is then able to actually select a home care agency of choice here. So they're only able to select from those agencies that are already working with the VA. So those who are contracted fully with the community care network that went through Optum or TriWest and work directly with the VA medical center in their area. So they can go through that list of potential agencies and decide, I would like to work with this agency. And the referral is then sent over to that agency of choice. And then the veteran, alongside their family and the agency, then are able to create that care schedule and then ultimately start receiving the care. So it starts with the assessment, and then goes all the way down to working with that agency to create care. And that is how it is done for the homemaker and home health aide benefit. The next major home care benefit is the aide and attendance pension. Now, this one works a little differently, where it's not so much a referral that goes from the VA to the individual provider, but rather it is a monthly pension paid directly to the veteran, depending on their care needs and income, of course. So it helps to cover in-home care, assisted living, nursing home costs for the eligible veteran and their surviving spouses. So that's a very important addition to this benefit, and that is that surviving spouses can also receive the aid and attendance pension. So the 2025 monthly benefits are as follows. For a single veteran, up to $2,358 a month is what they can receive. Married veterans are able to receive $3,740 a month. Veterans with a spouse, so one veteran and one civilian spouse, can receive up to $2,795 a month. And then a surviving spouse can receive up to $1,515 a month. Now, where a lot of veterans unfortunately get discouraged when they go on their care seeking journey is that they look for what is possibly available for them in terms of VA home care. And they see this aid and attendance pension and they go, that is fantastic. I would love to receive care through that route. But the eligibility criteria for the aid and attendance pension is actually much more stringent than the homemaker and home health aid benefit. And that is for two main reasons. So the first is that the veteran must have served for at least 90 consecutive days of active duty with at least one day during wartime periods, although combat service is not required. But we have taken the liberty of providing which exact wartime periods do qualify. So you see the most recent is the Gulf War. But so the veteran must have served during any of these specific periods in order to receive this benefit. Well, that is not the case for the homemaker and home health aid benefit. So for medical, it is much the same as the homemaker and home health aid benefit, with the addition that if someone is legally blind, bedridden, or requires nursing care, is another way to receive this benefit. But then lastly, there's a strict financial component for the aid and attendance pension. So the VA assesses the income and the assets, which does fortunately exclude primary residence and personal vehicle, to see if they have less than $159,000 in total assets in 2025. So that is not a very large amount of money. So many veterans find that they are actually not financially eligible or they are not service line eligible for this benefit. So when I mentioned earlier that a lot of veterans kind of get discouraged is they bump into this immediate no on their journey to receive care. So that's why if you are working with a veteran or if you are a veteran yourself, to know that the homemaker and home health aid program is available and a potential option, it's a great way to continue searching on your care journey. Now, if a veteran that you are working with does qualify for both the homemaker and home health aid benefit and the aid and attendance pension, well, they are actually allowed to receive both. So if they need, let's say a veteran needs 16 hours of care and they're receiving 8 hours a week from the homemaker and home health aid benefit, but they're receiving the full aid and attendance pension, well, they're able to receive that entire requirement of care so that they're able to stay in the home. So it's just very important to know that these two programs are able to work together. Although if you are working with the aid and attendance pension, if you are a provider or if you're working with a provider, those dollars are actually not billed to the VA or to the third-party administrators, Optum or TriWest. The veteran is given a cash benefit for this, so they get a pension, and so the veteran pays from that amount that they've already received. The next main programs that we're going to discuss are the family caregiver and veteran directed care. So this is a relatively new program that we're seeing pop up across the country, somewhat at the urging of the Elizabeth Dole Act. So part of the emphasis on staying in the home is allowing veterans to have as much choice as possible for their care. So the VDC program is how it's referred. It's available to veterans of all ages. It's the opportunity to receive home and community-based services in a consumer-directed way. So if anyone is familiar at all with Medicaid benefits, they know that there is a long-standing tradition of having a consumer-directed model where that person is able to actually direct their care and manage their care firsthand. So now the VDC program is the same thing, but for the VA. It's available for veterans who need personal care services and assistance with activities of daily living. Examples would be bathing, dressing, fixing meals, etc. And it's for those who are isolated or their caregivers are experiencing burden. So it's a very similar eligibility criteria as the homemaker and home health aid program. And oftentimes, if veterans are receiving homemaker and home health aid benefits and they need actually more care, oftentimes the VA will suggest that they move over to a VDC model because it allows them to those dollars to go a little bit farther sometimes. But there are some additional challenges. So you need to make sure that you understand what is right for that veteran and what that veteran truly needs, and if they have the capacity to be managing an employee, essentially. Um, because one of the main challenges that we find with the VDC program is that it does require the veteran to be responsible for setting the payment rates with their chosen caregiver, as well as hiring, scheduling, and fully managing the employment of that caregiver. So if the veteran is not capable of doing that or needs further assistance, then this might not be a great option for them, but it is an option that you should know about. The final program that we want to talk about is the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers. This is a fantastic program, especially if there is already a family caregiver providing a large amount of care to a veteran. So some of the eligibility criteria is that it is only for veterans with a 70+% service-connected disability. So if that veteran does not have a large percentage of need, then they may not be eligible. But again, that assessment must come from a VA doctor. Under this program, the family member who is already providing care to that veteran receives a stipend, they receive health insurance, and they receive a certain number of respite hours. Last I checked, it was 30 days of potential respite, up to 30 days of respite. So just like Lakeland was mentioning with Mr. P's story, um, those family members who, while they are able to receive payment and insurance, they need to live their lives too. And so that respite is then served by home care agencies in the community who are already contracted with the VA and with the third-party administrator. But it allows for that family member to take some time to themselves, make sure that they are being responsible to themselves, which then ultimately allows them to be responsible to and for that veteran as best as possible. Families will have to apply directly online at the VA Caregiver Support Program links. Now, a list of common conditions to qualify older veterans that we see and see all the time is Alzheimer's or dementia, Parkinson's disease, diabetes with complications, stroke, hearing loss, especially if it is service-connected, and then just general frailty or failure to thrive are kind of what we see as being the largest criteria. But the fact of the matter is that if your loved one or the veteran that you're working with seems like they need help with activities of daily living, it is worth having them be assessed by their VA primary care physician because they may qualify for some or many hours, and you just never know. Something that I like to say when working with these programs is that if you work with one VAMC, that means that you work with and know one VAMC. So things change pretty wildly from hospital to hospital, from system to system. So it is just always worth checking in with what's local to you to see what's available and if that veteran can receive services. So if you if you're working with a veteran, what are some steps that you need to take? You will first want to check the eligibility of that veteran. You'll want to see, are they even eligible for services? Are they eligible to receive VA medical care at all? The next step is applying for benefits and scheduling a visit with the VA physician. Um, so we'll talk about exactly where to do this, but applying for veterans for benefits can be relatively easy. There's a lot of systems and support across the country to help you with this, but ultimately it's the 1010 easy form that we talk about, or working with a VSO, which we will get into in just a second. The next step, of course, choosing that care provider, just like we mentioned earlier, and then creating a schedule of care alongside that care provider. Now, more on the enrollment steps, enrollment tips, is you will want to call this 404 number. So that's 404-828-5257. Again, that's 404-828-5257 for enrollment in VA Health. You will want to have email access and about 1 to 2 hours for the phone enrollment. It can take some time on the phone, but ultimately, if you're able to work with that veteran directly, it is very, very beneficial to be on that phone call with them. So when you are identifying that eligibility, you will want to assist in determining whether the veteran qualifies for specific benefits by looking at their service records. And then when it comes to helping with that application, some of the requirements that they'll need their social security number, they'll need a proof of discharge papers, you will need any health insurance information, including coverage through a spouse or domestic partner. You'll need wage and financial information. So that would be previous year gross income for the veterans, their spouse, and dependent children. And then lastly, any medical deductions, funeral expenses, educational expenses, etc., ready to go. A great website to use is the VA How to Apply website that I definitely recommend you going to, but then also using local services like a veteran service office. So the VSOs are spectacular. Their entire job is to help veterans access their care and do the best they possibly can with getting veterans care. And we have had just a phenomenal experience with them, and our providers have as well. And then lastly, if you are a care provider, you will want to be able to submit a request for services on your own. And so that would be through HSRM or whatever the VAMC is using at that particular hospital. But without further ado, I would love to hand this back over to Lakeland. I hope this was very educational about what is available to veterans and how to get enrolled.
Thank you so much, Jacob. It certainly was. I think sometimes just understanding what each program entails, the eligibility, can help us as professionals as we guide families as to what programs might be a good fit for them. So I appreciate all those tips that you offered. A lot of times I get questions around choosing a provider. So, once you qualify for benefits, questions about how do I go about finding a provider that's going to provide good care. So, of course, I broke down kind of the questions in two camps. The first, of course, you want to determine, does that provider accept VA benefits? Not all home care providers or care providers do accept those benefits. So, of course, that's a very important first question to ask. And then a quick follow-up to that is, can they assist with the application process? Many of these home care agencies are versed in the VA, and they have, contacts that can help them as they help families navigate that process. And then if you're still trying to, kind of find your provider, there is a great lookup tool, and I've provided the website right there, va.gov/find-locations. And I even went on there just to kind of do a search of what's available in my area. And for in-home supportive care, I just had to click the community providers in network, and then I searched for in-home supportive care. And then it showed me a list of all of the agencies in my area that do provide care through the VA. So that's a great place to start if you don't already have a provider that you use. So then when you are thinking about the provider that you want to use, there are some, I think, great questions to ask the agency. The first one being, what kind of care can and can't they provide? A lot of agencies can provide that hands-on personal care, while some can only provide more of that companionship, transportation, those kinds of services, providing respite, socialization. So it is important, especially if your loved one does need support or the veteran does need support with activities of daily living, that the provider can provide for all of those needs. It's also important to understand how much flexibility do you have in scheduling the care. Of course, we know caregivers, they're busy, they're trying to organize so many things, and so being able to work with a provider that has flexibility and can work with you, the vet and the family, to provide a schedule that works for everyone, that's really important. You can talk about what is their backup or replacement policy. We know life happens. Sometimes a professional caregiver might get sick or go on vacation. Talk with them. How quickly and smoothly can they provide a backup if it were needed? You might also ask, what is their screening process? Can you help choose the professional caregiver that comes into the home? Also, do they have kind of a quality assurance or supervisory program over the people that are coming into the home? To me, that speaks to the quality of the organization. And then, of course, with any caregiving scenario, communication is so key. So you want to ask, what is their plan for keeping everyone in this care circle, the family, the veteran, the agency, professional caregiver, how are they all going to communicate and stay connected to make sure that there's good continuity of care for that veteran? And so those are some, just a kind of a sweep over some of the really important questions to ask. But of course, interviewing the agency can be really helpful. And sometimes it's nice to interview multiple agencies to get a feel for their communication style, their responsiveness. So if you have the luxury in your area of having multiple providers to choose from, interview a couple and then make your decision from there. But we know that sometimes there can be some barriers to getting care into the home. And especially with veterans, sometimes we hear them say things like, I don't want to take away the benefit from somebody else, or somebody else needs it more than me. If you think about veterans and the work that they have done throughout their lives, sometimes they feel like maybe they're not quite ready for the service, they don't need it just yet, or maybe somebody else needs it more. But I think it's important to remind the veteran that it's not like if you don't use it, it's going to go to someone else. They really allocate these resources and benefits to the individual. And so it's not like you're going to take it away from someone else. They are going to service as many veterans as they can. And the veteran, they earned this service. They sacrificed quite a bit to serve our country. And so I think it's very well deserved. Another common scenario is that you might hear that they don't need help because they have a spouse or a family member that's supporting them. But I know it's really important to consider that we can't predict the future. We don't know if maybe the caregiver themselves might become ill or be hospitalized, or unfortunately maybe the spouse will pass away. And so then what will happen? So having these benefits in place to help provide that support can make sure that there is a plan if the spouse isn't available one day, or like in Mr. P's story that I mentioned earlier, caregivers, they carry a lot of weight to their caregiving role. And so the time away from caregiving through these benefits can be really beneficial so that they can continue to care for their veteran loved ones. So again, it might take it might feel in some situations you're kind of planning ahead for the future. But having these conversations early and starting to look into these services even before they're in kind of a crisis or dire need can be so beneficial, so that there is a smooth transition if the caregiver were ever to suddenly be unable to care. And then we mentioned this already, but something that can be overwhelming. And in these situations, if you hear that from a veteran or a caregiver or a family member, direct them to their local veteran service organization, their VSO. Maybe places like American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, the VFWs. There are professionals within those groups, these VSO representatives, that really can help guide families at no cost through these processes. And of course, use the tips that Jacob mentioned earlier as well. Calling that 800 number can be really helpful, so that you don't, sometimes if you go online, you might send something off and might not hear back for a little bit. So calling that number might be a great way to go through the process, set aside a couple of hours, and kind of just get it done, if you will. And again, as I mentioned several times already, a lot of times we as professionals, the ones on this call, family caregivers are coming to us for help and resources and support. So we can use this information that you learned today. You can download the slides and share it with families. I'll also share some more resources here in just a bit to help educate about VA benefits and the possibilities of utilizing these benefits, starting the conversations early, explaining the programs, helping them become aware of what they might be eligible for. Of course, we can refer to those VSOs and trusted resources. And again, I'll be sharing some of those on the coming slides. And then you can also assist them with their application preparation. You can offer guidance. You can provide that list that Jacob mentioned earlier, things like their proof of military service, having their financial records, that medical assessment. You can kind of prep them on the types of questions that the VA doctor might ask them about the help that they'll need and help them explain their needs. So, kind of just assisting them with that whole process can be really helpful. And then as a professional that works in this space, it might be helpful for you to get familiar with the agencies in your area that are connected to the VA that are providing regular care to veterans. And that way you have kind of your local referral network and can easily make those referrals. And I do have one last story before we close out about another veteran who one of our offices was able to support. And his name was Bob, again, a proud veteran. And at the time he started with the agency with Home Instead, he was approved for 9 hours of in-home care through his VA benefits. And it was a start, but it really wasn't enough. And it was becoming more and more apparent. And Bob, again, he was a proud man. He carried himself with a very quiet strength. So when the doctor asked if he could dress himself, he didn't hesitate. And he said, "Of course I can." But once Home Instead got in there and they started to realize he actually was struggling with bending over. He couldn't put his socks and shoes on his own. It really became exhausting. And if he dropped something on the floor, it stayed there. And out of pride and habit, he really minimized his needs. But really those small struggles he was experiencing were starting to impact his daily life and really his safety. He was becoming a fall risk. And so the Home Instead office talked with his family and encouraged him at his next VA appointment to really share with the doctor the challenges he was facing and be honest about the support that he needed. And he was able to get a little bit more care through his benefits, and that really was making a huge difference in his quality of life. He was able to have more regular care to help him get up, get dressed safely, and really set him up on a daily basis for success and independence. And so sometimes veterans, and this is probably true of all older adults, not just veterans, but they might not actually realize how much help they actually need, or maybe they're too proud to ask for it. So if we can help the veteran, their families recognize when more support is needed, we can help encourage that individual by sharing, this asking for more help isn't a weakness, not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength to help you stay in your home or wherever you call home a little bit longer. Can help enhance your quality of life. And again, it's a benefit that they worked hard to earn and that they deserve. So I just share that as an example because Jacob mentioned earlier, sometimes the veteran and their family do need to advocate a little bit for the needs of the veteran, especially if the veteran isn't willing to maybe honestly share about the care and support that he or she needs. Okay, so on to the resources. Oops, skipped that one. So first, I mentioned that there is a VA caregiver support program. So I wanted to be sure to share the website for that, caregiver.va.gov. They also have a support line, and each VA medical center has a caregiver support program team. And you can search for this state-by-state program on their website. So certainly, caregivers they they need support too, and so making sure they're connected with these local programs can be really helpful. And then I'll leave this resource page up here as we go to questions here in just a moment. But of course, the Veterans Affairs website is a great resource, as is that benefit enrollment number. And I fibbed earlier, it is not an 800 number, it's a 404 number. I apologize about that. But then again, reiterated the caregiving support program. And for those that aren't quite sure where their military service records are, I included the website where you can go and request them. Also, again, that tool where you can go to look up agencies that provide care. That can be really helpful. Holman said many of our offices are approved to provide VA benefits. So, of course, you can search our website by zip code to find the location nearest you. Also, sometimes it's helpful to know where your local VFW is if you need a VSO to help you and your loved one navigate that application process. So there's that website there. And then Jacob mentioned the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and how they are very active in the advocacy of advocating on behalf of veterans and these benefits. And they have a lot of great resources too for military caregivers and spouses. So just a wonderful organization. So wanted to include their website. And then I also did a podcast episode on my Caregiver Chats podcast about this very topic. We actually cover a lot of what we covered today, but it's more geared towards a family caregiver. So if you want to check out that episode, it might be something easy to pass along to a family caregiver. I hyperlinked it there, but you can just search Caregiver Chats in your favorite podcasting app, and it's episode 35. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, and I again want to thank Jacob for sharing his expertise on the topic as well.
Thank you so much. That was such a great presentation, and we got so many questions in, so thank you all for those great questions. Lakeland, let's touch base after because we did get a request. We're kind of short on time, so whatever we don't get to on this call, maybe we can provide some answers in a follow-up. So we'll touch base on that. But to make the most out of our time, I tried to narrow down the top 5 questions that I saw come up. So one of the most asked questions, people want to know how benefits extend to spouses. Can spouses qualify on their own? And can they both receive services at the same time?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take this one. So the only benefit that's available to spouses would be that aid and attendance pension. So the homemaker and home health aid benefit, as well as the VDC benefit, those do not apply. I suppose the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers, if you are that spouse providing that care, you can receive the payment and the insurance that comes with that. But in terms of actually receiving the care, that is not applicable to anyone other than the veteran outside of the aid and attendance program. I do believe that, if you are a surviving spouse, you are able to receive that benefit as long as you qualify on your own. And of course, if the veteran is still alive and you both need the care and you both are qualified, you can also receive that benefit at the same time.
Thank you. Another question that came up frequently, a lot of families discover benefits late in the process. Is there any way to recover lost time or missed payments?
Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be a possibility from our experience. It's kind of a tragic part of how America treats veterans, where they give the ultimate sacrifice. They go and serve for the country, and then there just is not adequate education as to what is possible and what's available to them. So when families find later and after the fact that, oh, I could have been eligible for all of this, unfortunately, the VA is not really going to look back for those benefits. But what I can say is, that advocacy is absolutely the best weapon here to make sure that everyone is aware of what's available. And then, better late than never is how I would say, like, even though it would have been fantastic to receive, 5 years of care earlier, don't let that be something that diminishes the fantastic care that you could receive today and in the future. So that's how I would kind of look at that.
Absolutely. And you know what? This webinar is a great way to start the conversation and spread awareness. Just so you know, it is available for 60 days on demand. So if you know someone that could use this information, they can go ahead and register anytime within those 60 days and kind of have a nice overview of this information. There is also a concern about veterans who can't get to an office or hospital. Is in-home support available for applying, and does being in non-VA hospice affect eligibility?
That's a great question. So if you are unable to actually get to a VA medical center, I would encourage you to reach out to whatever VA contacts you have, because at the end of the day, you would actually need to be assessed by a VA doctor. Now, I do know that there is the possibility of having peer-to-peer authorizations. So if you are receiving your VA health benefits, you're already enrolled, and a different doctor is running an assessment on you and they determine that you need health care, there is the possibility for that doctor to communicate with the VA doctor. But that's not available everywhere, and that's really VA medical center specific. Now, if you're receiving care outside of the VA medical system, I've never heard of that disqualifying a veteran from receiving care in the system. Just in order for them to eventually receive those benefits through the VA, it does, of course, have to get entered into the VA system at some point. So if you're working with a veteran who's unable to get that assessment, I would say reach out to a VSO and see how they would recommend moving forward. And if that veteran already has the VA health benefits, if they're already enrolled in their health benefits, then seeing if doing a peer-to-peer authorization is a potential option for you.
Thank you for that information. And for people that are just beginning the process, where should they start? Can the discharge planners help? And how do you connect with a local veteran service officer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So local veteran service organizations, there's one in every single county. So I would recommend just a quick internet search to see who's there. But I think the VA benefits enrollment, if you don't have those benefits, that hotline is really the best place to get started. That or a 1010 Easy form online. Those would be the two places that I would go.
Okay. Great. And then one final kind of big picture question, and I feel like this is really what this entire webinar presentation was about, but even when veterans qualify, many don't get the support they're entitled to. What are the most common obstacles, and how can professionals or families really step in and advocate?
I think that is a great question, and Jacob, I'd love to hear your thoughts from your experience. I think sometimes the resistance on the behalf of the veteran might be an obstacle. And I think approaching it from understanding what their goals are for quality of life and helping them understand how these benefits can help work towards that goal, that's always a great way to broach the conversation if the resistance to care is part of that equation. But Jacob, any other kind of barriers that you have come across that would be helpful for people to understand?
Yeah, I think, I want to agree with you that the resistance to care is something that we hear about a lot at Paradigm. Something else that I have interfaced with directly is there are some home care providers who find it very difficult to provide care to a veteran on a 1 hour a day basis. That's very challenging for a home care provider operationally. And so what I would recommend is, if you are working with a veteran trying to help them get these hours covered, or if you are a home care provider yourselves, make sure that you're either working with a provider who is able to do whatever is needed and what that case manager is asking for, or make sure that you yourself are able to serve that, because ultimately serving the veteran is the end goal, and making sure that they have a good quality of life is really, it's just the best thing you could do for your community, in my opinion. So making sure that you're flexible and able to care for the person in front of you how it is they are asking to be cared for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are at time, but I want to thank you for joining us today for this important conversation. We hope that today's session provided you with some practical tools, some new perspective, and inspiration to continue your work supporting older adults and their families. A special thank you to our presenters, Dr. Lakeland Eichenberger and Jacob Tattle, and to Home Instead for their partnership and support in making this session possible. We encourage you to stay connected and join us for our next session, Supporting Older Individuals Through Difficulties and Challenges. That's on June 4th. Remember to download the slides. You can do that in the Materials tab, or you can access them in your classroom. There are really great links and resources here that have been provided. For additional resources and information, please visit asaging.org. You can also reach out to us at institute@asaging.org. Thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a wonderful day. All right, thank you.